Let's do a show, everybody. It's officially that time of the year when we have bye weeks, we have international games, and we have you. Thank you for being here for another edition, a Tuesday edition, heading into week 5 of Inside Coverage, the how and the why and any and everything you need to know about the National Football League. We are here 4 days, weekly, Monday through Thursday, to catch you up to date. And we are not only in podcast form. Thank you for liking, subscribing, sharing, if you are subscribing or listening rather in podcast form. And thank you for watching on yahoosports.tv, our brand new FAST channel. You can also watch the Yahoo Sports Network on the YouTube, on any FAST TV, on you name it. You find it, the Yahoo Sports app. You can watch this show, and we thank you for that. My name is Andrew Siciliano. I'm on the road today. The office has moved to Cleveland, about to ship out to London with the Browns as they get ready for the game at Tottenham, Week 5 against the Vikings. My partner on the show today, Jori Epstein. I am wearing a Guardian cap. They are now allowed during the podcast. You could actually wear the Guardian cap. It's not to prevent head injuries. It's just actually from the Guardians, because I was crying in my bottled water today. I went to a playoff baseball game. Hope you had a better day than me.
Well, Andrew, I think I'm less wondering whether the Guardian caps are allowed on the podcast and whether, like the training camps across the NFL, we're soon going to be requiring and mandating Guardian caps for certain episodes. So that's just let me know if that's coming and I'll have mine ready, but I don't have one yet.
Hey, Romeo Dobbs wears one. He's one of a couple of guys, more than a couple of guys who now wear them in games. He had 2 touchdowns Sunday night, if memory serves. So you can actually be productive when wearing either a Guardians cap or a Guardian cap.
There you go. I'm so glad we were able to have this discussion on the show today.
Yeah. You know what? I needed something to get into the show, and that was my
I thought
at the time clever gimmick to get into the show.
It was.
How are you? How's your world today?
My world is good. I've been going down lots of rabbit holes about tie games, which I know we're going to talk on the show, and just feel like there's always one thing to the next. I mean, 2 Monday night games definitely leave Tuesday being almost like a Monday in terms of how busy they are, and I love it. It's fun.
So let's talk about those Monday night games, because I'll be honest with you, they weren't the best games, and I find it annoying. I get why ESPN wants multiple games, and I get why the league can find benefit from multiple games, and I'm all for that 9:30 Eastern time window on Sunday to extend the day to 4 major broadcast windows. I'm all for more television money, because all of that money trickles downhill to the players and really to the entire NFL establishment. I don't know why we overlap the games on Monday. I just don't get it. I don't think it's good for the fans. I think how they did it a couple of weeks ago, where you had the back-to-back games, where you had a West Coast start after the East Coast start. That West Coast game was in Vegas, and a lot of people on the East Coast don't like it. That was the game, remember, where Tom Brady was up in the booth with the headset on and everyone lost their mind. East Coast fans don't like if they go to bed, but I would rather have it that way than the games overlapping. Honestly, Jori, I'm sitting here watching the early game. The early game was in Miami. And all of a sudden, I see a highlight from the game in Denver. And listen, I knew we had 2. We talked about it on the pod yesterday. But I had forgotten in that moment while I was eating dinner when, oh boy, well, I forgot. Wait, where's the other game? Hold on, let me set up my iPad. So now I have 2 TVs. And I don't think you serve the audience well by overlapping the games.
Yeah, I think it's tough because on one hand, I was glad when 11:30 Eastern came around and there were no more games going on, as opposed to 1 in the morning or whatever it was a few weeks ago when we had the 10:15 start. But I will say it was hard to watch both with the level of detail. And when I'm watching games from a reporting standpoint, it's not just about the plays that happen. It's often about what the broadcasters are saying, because they're so dialed in. And I can't thoughtfully watch both broadcasts live. So I was going back and forth one to the next rather than trying to watch them at the same time. Because okay, Troy Aikman's talking about the Bengals being embarrassing yesterday. Well, I can't hear that if I'm listening to the Miami broadcast a couple of weeks ago with Brady. I mean, maybe you see him on the screen, but it's so much of what the broadcast teams get in terms of that extra information that I'm looking for, that I really do want to be listening to the broadcast, not just watching.
Yeah, 100%. And you can listen to two. Heck, for 18 years, I used to watch 10 games at once. I'd like to think I'm a pretty good multitasker, but to your point, it's different when you're at work, when you're locked in, then, and this is a first world problem. We cover football for a living. We get it, okay? But when you're actually at home and you're trying to focus, you're trying to work, you're trying to do your job, prep, write, whatever, it's a little bit different. I think the fans feel that as well. They kind of have to pick or choose which game. Now, the late game was a blowout. The early game wasn't that close either, but the late game was a blowout, and I think people kind of looked at that and went, maybe I don't have to flip over. Maybe I'll stick with this one and then go to bed after the game in Miami ends. Let's talk about the game in Miami because it had one of those moments where you just go, oh my God, I need to turn away from the television. Dolphins win. They beat the Jets 27-21. The Dolphins season is not over. They are 1-3. The Jets are 0-4. But the moment that everyone came away talking about after that game was the gruesome injury to Tyreek Hill, which initially the broadcast didn't see. It was Chris Fowler and Dan Orlovsky. There's a lot going on in the network broadcast booth. Tyreek Hill caught a ball on the sideline, and I looked up. I did a double take and went, wait, hold on. It was almost like you're kind of squinting at the screen. Like, did I see that right? Is his leg supposed to go that way? And immediately, medical staff rushes over. Everyone's waving to the sideline, let's get some help, and they go to break. And then you just start seeing Twitter or X or whatever social media platform you're on explode with, oh my God, please don't show me the replay again. They showed the replay again, and then you could see that Tyreek had a dislocated kneecap, an ACL injury. I mean, it was as gruesome an injury as you will see on a field. And then they're carting him off, and he's smiling and laughing, which was bonkers. I mean, more credit to him, I guess, for being able to fight through the pain and smile and, I don't know, think big picture. I don't know what he was thinking. I'm just trying to guess in that moment. But man, it was an odd scene.
It was absolutely an odd scene, and it was an odd scene because of the injury, because of everything that was coming out after, whether it's pictures of him at the hospital. Teron Armstead, who used to be the tackle for the Dolphins, said Tyreek FaceTimed him. I mean, it's definitely not usually what you hear after someone suffers that kind of injury. And while he's not old, he's 31. I mean, we have Aaron Rodgers playing a decade after that. It's not like there's this guarantee that you can come back to the level you were beforehand when you have that degree of ligament damage and going away. But I mean, it's also just one of those injuries you can't really forget. I played in a high school basketball game where one of our opponent's knees went the other way. And like, you always
Yeah.
remember where you were in that moment when you see that. Like, it is insane. So definitely a big deal in terms of what Tyreek will ever be able to do again as a football player, and also a big deal in terms of where the Miami Dolphins go from here.
Yeah, Drew Rosenhaus, Tyreek's agent, tweeted today that, hey, surgery successful, which is a very good thing. Not trying to make light of a tweet or an announcement. I'm still waiting for the first time for an agent or a team to announce unsuccessful surgery. Okay, good.
Mm,
Rosenhaus says that
Tyrod
Tyreek
Taylor.
should be back. I'm sorry, Gerard. Yeah, okay.
Tyrod
There's
Taylor.
one. It doesn't happen very often. Every surgery is always deemed a success. I want a speedy recovery for anyone who has an injury like that, clearly. Rosenau says he's going to be ready. Hill should be ready to get back on the field for week 1 next year. I think there's a very good chance that Tyreek Hill has played his last down with the Dolphins. He's going to be 32 next March. Right now, they're paying him $26 million in cash. He was a trade target. A lot of people had circled him and said if the Dolphins season continues to go downhill 5 weeks from today, which is when we have the deadline, that Tyreek Hill is one of those players, whether it's to Kansas City, wherever, that you call the Dolphins and say, hey, give us that weapon. We'll take him for the stretch run. The Dolphins now at 1-3. You could argue they saved their season. They played their best game, but now their most valuable trade chip, and sorry to make players seem like depreciating commodities, but you watched Hard Knocks last year with how the Giants talked about Saquon upstairs. That's simply, unfortunately, how players are often viewed. They no longer have him to trade if they continue to lose games. And if he's done with the Dolphins, Jori, I think it's also fair to ask at 32, when the guy's primary weapon, primary skill is speed, is he ever
Right.
going to be the same guy? And if not, does he ever play again?
Right. I think he'll play again, but I don't think he'll be the same guy. I think that's what we've seen from other players. And I also think that injuries and your ability to return from them depends on the position you play. So again, we've seen quarterbacks have really bad injuries. I was there when Dak Prescott's ankle bone like broke through the skin. So it was gruesome. And he did come back from it, and he continued to come back from injuries afterwards. But that is different because he's not being asked to sprint down the field. He's being asked to manipulate the pocket and read defenses, and still an insane level of physicality and high football IQ, but it's not the same degree of specifically speed and explosion, which is what you need those ligaments to do.
So where does that leave the Dolphins? I mean, Mike McDaniel, people thought he might be out after Buffalo. His team fought reasonably hard, hung in until the fourth quarter, lost in Buffalo. They come back out of that after the mini bye, and they put a good performance on tape last night. I mean, they lose Tyreek, but they get Darren Waller back. A lot of people had written him off, thought, what are you doing making that trade? He missed the first month and then comes in, scores a couple of touchdowns. Tua looked good. The offense was back to, like the Harlem Globetrotters kind of offense, not maybe on the scoreboard, but Tua's flipping the ball behind his back. The defense had some energy. Are they all of a sudden back in the AFC conversation? Granted, it is early.
I mean, I think we should temper a little bit of our excitement over what they
Yeah.
did yesterday when remembering that they are going against a now 0-4 Jets team. But I think when I consider how the Dolphins move forward from here, to me, it's what did Tyreek offer and how are you going to replicate that? And if you can't replicate that, where do you go? So obviously he is explosive and he's getting touchdowns and yards. But when I talk to people around the league, I think there's this idea that Tyreek is kind of a threefold weapon. There's his vertical threat and the speed he's able to provide. And then there's his versatility. So in short and intermediate situations, he's able to have that acceleration, change of direction, get the yards after the catch. So it's not just down the field that you're looking for someone to be replaced. And then on top of that, what he did in pre-snap motion is pretty underrated, both in terms of how it confused defenses as they're trying to rush Tua and defend against the Miami Dolphins as a whole, and also in terms of how that allowed Tua and the Dolphins to identify what the defense was doing. And so I think you really are not going to be able to replicate all three of those. And so you want to say, okay, maybe we're not going to have another receiver do that. Yeah, Jalen Waddle has speed, and I'm not counting him out for anything, but he's not Tyreek, and we all know that. And also, defensive attention that was on Tyreek is now going to be on Jalen and others, so you have to factor that in. But I think you say if you still get some of the speed from Jalen, and Devon Achane has a lot of potential, both in terms of how he's running, and also maybe he can kind of help out in the passing game. And then you say, well, Darren Waller, I mean, we didn't expect what he did last night, so why can't he do more? To me, I think the key for the Dolphins will be to realize you don't have Tyreek anymore. Your offense can't look the same. Don't try and make it look the same. Try and understand where should you now be efficient rather than explosive. Pick your spots to be explosive.
Yeah, and a lot of people have pointed out, he got deep last night. A lot of people have pointed out that, well, Tyreek hasn't really gotten deep the last couple of years. Maybe he's lost his speed. He hasn't lost that much speed. The Dolphins can't exactly take 5-7 step drops to let him run long because everything's got to be quick game. They're calling an offense for a quarterback who really can't get hit. I mean, think about that big picture.
Right.
Whenever anyone wants to be
That's
hypercritical on Mike McDaniel's offense and his play calling, and maybe it's not the same creative, fun offense that dropped 70 on the Broncos a couple of years ago in September. We all get that. But he's got to call plays for a quarterback that can't get hit. Like whenever he scrambles, I cringe. And there's a moment last night
Right.
that drew a flag where he took a hit when sliding. And a lot of people thought it was dirty. I don't think it was overly dirty, but it certainly was a flag where he like, please get up, please get up. He bounced, he got up, he smiled, he laughed. But that's the offense the Dolphins have to run. Real quick, a lot of people assume, look, Tyreek, I think plays again, but let's say he doesn't. All right, let's say worst case scenario. I think a lot of people look at him and say he passes the Hall of Fame eye test, which is what my gut told me as well. But, I dug into the numbers a little bit this afternoon. He's an 8-time Pro Bowler. That's great. He has 819 career receptions. That sounds like a lot, doesn't it? It's actually only 37th all-time. Keep in mind, there's a logjam at wide receiver, like Torrey Holt's still not in, Steve Smith Sr. still not in. There are guys ahead of him at wide receiver if, let's say, his career ended tomorrow. He has 11,363 yards. That's a lot, isn't it? It's 41st all-time. Well, he has 96 career touchdowns, including rushing and 5 in the return game. I mean, that's got to be a lot, right? It's actually 29th all time. Now it's tied with a Hall of Famer and Eric Dickerson, but it's only 29th all time. There are 6 active players that right now have more career receptions than Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, and Mike Evans. So while I think Tyreek's a Hall of Famer, if his career ended right now, with that logjam at wide receiver, I'm not entirely sure that he would get it.
Well, and Andrew, I think you add to that, okay, what has he done in the playoffs? And clearly he helped the Chiefs get to Super Bowl. He won a
Sure.
Super Bowl. But I think that there's this sense of, okay, the Chiefs also won Super Bowls after him, plural. And so when you're trying to assess that, he was not the variable that won the Super Bowl. You could say Patrick Mahomes, you could say Andy Reid, but I actually think that it kind of like negates it. It doesn't fully remove it from his resume, but it is going to mute the impact among voters.
All right, we're running heavy again because that's what I do. I talk too much, but I want to hit on the Jets here because the Jets are the other side of that game in Miami on Monday night. They lose and they fall to 0-4, and Aaron Glenn was heard yelling at his team through the thin walls at Hard Rock Stadium. The assembled press waiting for the press conference on the other side of that wall heard Aaron Glenn yelling. And then listen to what running back Breece Hall said after the game.
And what did you think of the game? That's more important.
It's just a tale of, 3 out of our 4 losses. Teams will shoot themselves in the foot, then we come back and shoot ourselves in the head. So you can't win if, defensively, if, or offensively, if we're not, converting on third down, if we're not getting us to third and manageables. We're in 2nd and 25, 2nd and 20, 1st and 15, getting stupid, dumb penalties and stuff. So that's been the frustrating thing because, we're moving the ball up and down the field at will, how we want to, or we'll come down and, get to the strike zone and then boom, 15-yard penalty, 10-yard penalty, and teams will just sit back in zone and, you can't really, they're willing to give up that 3 and not give up that 7. So that was a frustrating part, turnovers, and then making mistakes on, with fumbles and all that type of stuff, crazy penalties. It's just been frustrating.
First of all, the shooting yourself in the foot and shooting yourself in the head is an interesting way to describe it. But he's right on the penalties. But Sauce Gardner took it a little bit further. He said that, in essence, he's getting flagged, and he's always been handsy. He's getting flagged because they're a bad team. And a lot of bad teams will tell you, or a lot of grumpy fans of bad teams will tell you, that they don't get calls because the officials favor the better teams. I don't necessarily buy that. Sauce said it's because they're bad that other teams aren't getting flagged. They're bad, so they get flagged, that other teams do more egregious things and don't get flagged. Jori, the numbers are this. He leads the team, Sauce does, with 4 penalties, 3 accepted. Only 4 corners in the league have more penalties than Sauce. And last year, he was flagged 10 times, 9 were accepted. Charles Robinson, a couple of weeks ago, said something along the lines of, if the Jets knew he was going to get flagged all the time, maybe they wouldn't have given him that big second contract. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that's about the second contract. I think it is interesting because Sauce is not wrong that not every game is officiated in the same way and it's not always consistent and accurate. It's kind of impossible for that. Like, we can be hard on the officials if we want, and the NFL has a lot they could do to invest in better and more consistent officiating. There's still going to be a human element to it, so I think we have to be realistic about that. I mean, I usually saw it in reporting on the Cowboys on the other side, where Micah Parsons always felt like no one was getting called for offensive holding against him, and he felt like, oh, because the Cowboys were high profile, he wasn't getting that. So the losing, the high profile, everyone has their reason. I think regardless of the reason, you have to ask yourself, what is Aaron Glenn preaching here, and is it getting through? Because we talked after that first game when they fumbled and they lost to the Steelers, and he said, if you lose the game for us, you're not going to be on the field. And he cut Xavier Gibson. And I said at the time, I didn't think that was a sustainable way to run a team. I'm not saying that he wasn't going to cut that guy anyway, but kind of tying the two together in a way that he somewhat did, Okay, well, what do we do this week now when you do have guys like Sauce getting penalties and you have fumbles, but they're coming from Braylon Allen and Justin Fields and Isaiah Williams, who, by the way, replaced Xavier Gibson? I think at some point you have to ask, is this fire and brimstone approach going to work? Is it just that you're going to need, like, I don't know, half a season, a full season, 2 seasons of harsh words before anyone listens? I don't view this as Sauce not getting the contract. I view this as more what is going on with the Jets culture, because when I was in their locker room a few weeks ago during the week, they told me they want their identity to be discipline, and I would say their identity right now is undisciplined.
Yeah, I mean, they had double-digit penalties. They were not good, and there's a reason Aaron Glenn was yelling. They played undisciplined football, and they gave up the football, and it was ugly. It was ugly on a national stage, and they had plenty of time to get ready for this one. The Dolphins had more, clearly, but they're 0-4, and now they get the Cowboys coming to town. Then they have to go face a good Broncos team in London, then come home for Carolina. So on paper, these are all winnable games. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit against the Cowboys, but they're all winnable games. But one of them's in London here. And right now at 0-4, you're not good enough to just say, oh, yeah, that's a win, even against the Carolina Panthers in a couple of weeks. I like Aaron Glenn. I think he's building something. I think with any first-year head coach, rookie head coach, you need to give them, whomever it is, more time. But that offense, especially when Justin Fields had to just drop back, was hard to watch last night. And they lose Braylon Allen. Why is he on special teams? I don't know. He's a big physical runner who certainly has speed. Should he be a kick returner? For my money, no. But they lose him, and now it's Breece Hall, and now they got to face the Cowboys. Speaking of the Cowboys, Jori's been doing some reporting on league reaction to the tie on Monday night. Coming up, which Cowboy didn't know that ties were a thing? Yes, that is still a conversation. It is Inside Coverage on a Tuesday. It is Inside Coverage here on a Tuesday. Thanks for listening, subscribing, liking, if it's in podcast form, how you're taking in today's show. If you're watching on yahoosports.tv, on the YouTube page, on the Yahoo app, we thank you as well. My name is Andrew Siciliano, Jori Epstein with me today as we go back to the Sunday night, the Sunday night game that ended after midnight, and it ended in a 40-40 tie. Remember, Jori, years ago when Donovan McNabb took all this grief when he said, I didn't know that you can have a tie? George Pickens told our friend James Slater at NFL Network the same thing today. He didn't know that you could have a tie. He played well. I mean, big late touchdown, 134 yards and a couple of scores. Yay, George Pickens. But you can have a tie. You're writing on Yahoo about the whole tie thing. How does the rest of the league view what happened on Sunday night?
So, Andrew, before we get to that, to give George Pickens a little bit of credit, he got in the league in 2022. From when he entered the league until the Cowboys and Packers tied, before that game, how many ties do you think there were during George Pickens' time in the league?
Okay, that's a great question. I don't
So 2022, 2023, and 2024.
I'm going to say 3.
Okay, there were 2, both in 2022.
Okay.
So after his rookie year, there weren't. So I actually assumed that all these players are like, they get ties, they either saw one in their division or they've been around it. They're actually pretty uncommon. There have been only, let's see if I can get this right. There have been 10 ties in the last decade and only 5 before that from 2000. So 15 ties before this week from 2000 through 2024. It was about 3.8%. And so when you look at this and you say, this is actually not a very common occurrence, but will it start occurring more with the new overtime rules? And so I was asking around people, basically just saying, do you think the new overtime rules are going to lead to more ties? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Do you care? And here's what I found. First of all, just to recap on the new overtime rules, we already had a rule that overtime was 10 minutes, or it could be up to 10 minutes. But previously, before the season, in the regular season, if you scored a touchdown, if you had the ball first, the game was over. Now each team has a chance. And if you each score a touchdown, then you keep going if there's time left in the 10 minutes. So on one hand, this wasn't really a new element in the sense that they each went for a field goal, but the Cowboys likely changed their decision making because scoring a touchdown would not have won the game for them. The Packers still would have had a chance to answer. So now you say, well, likelihood is their defense, based off what they've done the last 4 weeks, we're going to give up at least a field goal. And so you were kind of playing with an understanding that your defense was definitely going to be on the field and be a liability rather than just let's get the game over with. You can criticize it, but I think that the math changes. Now, when I ask people about the potential impact of this, there's not active conversations right now about changing the rules. Further, I should say, because there were active conversations that did change the rules. I think it's interesting, firstly, that the Eagles actually initially proposed a 15-minute overtime rather than a 10-minute overtime when they wanted to give both teams a chance to score. And had we seen 15 minutes the other night, there might not be a tie. While there are people in the league who don't love that ties can be a thing, I think not all ties are created equally. And the Cowboys-Packers unusual tie is in some ways going to both hurt and help the case against ties because on one hand, this is a more emotional game than the average game. Micah Parsons is coming back. Everyone wanted to have a winner between Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones. This isn't going to be forgotten today. Like, this is going to be something that is continued to be thought about for years to come as we grade this trade. On the other side, if you're the league and you have a 40-40 game on Sunday Night Football, this is not 20-20 or 16-16 as recent teams. So as people were telling around the league is a winner here. The teams might not have won, but the league loves this. They had 80 points, first time ever, 40-40, second highest scoring tie in NFL history. So for that reason, I don't think that this game alone is going to spur a change. But I do think, and people who have studied this around the league tell me, we might see more ties this year. Because of this overtime structure, there's an increased likelihood for ties.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's interesting here because I'm with you. A lot of these ties you see over the years are 13-13, 10-10. They're bad games in which offensive ineptitude in the fourth quarter and in overtime leads to a tie game. That's not what this was. This was a fun back and forth game. Sunday Night Football on NBC is always the most highest rated show on television in America every week. So you had a massive audience, especially you're going to have a massive audience for this game. I thought it was wildly entertaining. And I hope people understand, you get credit for a half win, okay? A half win for the tie. What do you mean a half win? Well, at the end of the year, if a team is like 9-7, 9-7-1, in essence, they have 9.5 wins in the standings. I know that sounds crazy. A 9-7-1 team is obviously better than a 9-8 team. So the tie does benefit both of them. It makes the playoff calculations and all the clinching scenarios at the end of the year exceedingly complicated, right? They have to work overtime, but they could be okay. There are people whose job it is to do all that math. I do think if you go back to when this was first voted in, it was a league meeting. We were there, Jori, owners meeting at the Breakers in Palm Beach. And this was all a reaction to that amazing Chiefs-Bills game that a lot of the players in that game will still to this day tell you. Deion Dawkins said it on this show a couple of weeks ago. Greatest game he's ever played in, he's ever seen. Well, Josh Allen didn't get the ball, so therefore we must correct it. There are people that still think that this is an overcorrection from just one game. Like, it's no big deal. And maybe they shouldn't have put it into the first place.
Right. I think it's definitely true. And initially this was that's why I was curious about this game, because it is always the higher profile games that are more likely to lead to a change because there's something that we're talking about, whether that's Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes in the past, or whether that's the third quarterback rule that we've talked about recently when the Niners and Eagles were playing. And the NFL was like, we want to make sure that the quarterback play is a little bit better because they were embarrassed relative to the level of audience. I still think that there's an element here, though, of if you are going to make the change, like I think the Eagles' suggested change made more sense. I'm not trying to get players out there for so much longer. I also think we should remember that the likelihood of this happening, it's like a couple times every few years. So this is not like every single week we're adding 5 minutes to the game relative to what it is. But the idea is, in the playoffs, you're not going to have a tie. And so to make the rule align with what you changed for the playoffs because you thought it was the best for the playoffs, I do understand why that's a little bit, it doesn't totally make sense. And I think that you should say, well, maybe if it is 15 minutes, then you'll have another possession and then everyone gets one chance, but you don't all get two. So I can tell you that the Cowboys and the Packers didn't like how it ended.
Yeah, no, I realize that, and as long as we don't do something gimmicky like hockey does, or go to penalty
Yeah.
shootout, or have a field goal kicking contest. If that's the case, by the way, the Cowboys would have won. They have Brandon Aubrey, but as long as we don't go to something, again, gimmicky to decide a game, football needs to be better than that, like baseball with the runner on second. We're kind of used to it by now, but I still think it's gimmicky. It speeds the game up, right? But I don't like it, and I'm kind of a purist and traditionalist when it comes to that in baseball, and I would feel the same way in football. Let's get to the other thing in that game, the Jerry Jones, Micah Parsons thing. So Micah said again, and he said this on the podium when he got to got to Green Bay with that delightful sweater for his introductory press conference, that he had not spoken to Jerry after the trade. Jerry, take us to the timeline here, Jori, because you were following Jerry's radio appearance today, because they kind of had a back and forth on this.
Right. So Micah again says after the game, in terms of why it wasn't emotional, that he's like, I kind of lost the emotions when he didn't trade me. If you look at the way that the Packers traded Kenny Clark, it was different. He goes, Jerry didn't even call me. I would have thought he had the respect to like tell me this to my face. So Jerry is asked about this on the radio on Tuesday, and he said, I don't want to answer that, but Micah told me to lose his dial. He said dial, not number, not phone. He said to lose his dial. So I quit calling him after that. Take his number off his dial. And so I think when you have this, there's kind of a he said, she said. Pretty much every element of this, going back to the March meeting that was maybe about leadership, maybe about a contract extension, the beginning of the end for the Cowboys and Micah Parsons. Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons have had wildly different stories on all parts of this. I would say the truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in between. But I think that we should remember that when hearing from them, because I don't know, if you say don't call me, like the same way that Mike is like, well, I wanted to be there for life. Well, you did ask for a trade, even if you were posturing. So I think we have to be a little bit honest that neither side really wanted to make this work when it came down to it.
Yeah, and listen, we've all been in those situations where you have a fight, an argument, a disagreement with a good friend or someone you're in a relationship with, and you feel like you have to, go your separate ways. I have been the person who says, don't call me. Like, I have been the person that says, maybe not lose my number, but don't ever reach out again. The other person's allowed to reach out. Like, if you have something to say, if someone ever said that to me, if I have something to say, if I have an apology to make, if I want to approach this person and go and be the bigger person and just say, hey, listen, you don't want me to call or to reach out, but I do have something to say. All right. And it might be, I respect you. Like, I'm sorry it ended this way. I wish you well. It was business. It's not personal. I wish that we could have found common ground. Unfortunately, we didn't. I hope through time that we could find a way to heal these wounds. And I realize it's not going to happen now. Okay? Maybe it takes weeks, months, years. I mean, go watch the Jerry the Gambler thing on Netflix, and you see the awkwardness still between Jerry and Jimmy when you could see them like trying to redo their takes. Well, hold on. No, I don't like it. Let me try it this way one more time. Some stuff never goes away. But even if somebody had said to me, lose my number or lose my dial, like, does he still have a rotary phone? Like, anyway, I would still feel that I needed to be the bigger and better person, or just be the adult, not calling Micah a child, but just be an adult, to say, okay, I respect your wish that I shut up, but I still have something to say, and it comes from the heart, and I mean well.
There's a little bit of irony here that everyone got on Jerry Jones for being too personable with his players and talking to them too directly and having Micah in for a meeting. And now they're like, Jerry, why aren't you talking to your players enough? Like with Jerry and Dak Prescott, for example, they did have some conversations before. Now, they didn't talk about numbers and it didn't get into the agent game. And I'm not trying to even defend Jerry in the sense of, I don't think he should do some of the things he does in terms of trying to directly negotiate with players. And I tell this to Cowboys people all the time. I don't care if you live by different rules on a lot of things. You're subject to the CBA, whether you like it or not. I do think, however, that Jerry believes that he and Micah had an agreement. Now they shouldn't have been able to, but he believes he and Micah shook on something and Micah didn't go back on it. So, and then he sees Micah ask for a trade. Well, who asks for a trade from the Cowboys? I'm not trying to pump up the Cowboys, but we really don't see that happening. That doesn't happen in the modern era of football. And so, or the modern era, I should say, in the last 10, 20 years. So Jerry does have some degree of a point of if Micah's telling me, stop talking to me, talk to my agent. And then he's saying, I don't want to be a part of your team anymore. Trade me so I can go somewhere where they treat me differently. I don't know. Maybe Jerry's okay, fine, go somewhere else. We don't have to talk anymore. I think there is one element where you can be the bigger person after the breakup, and another element where sometimes the person who started it or who finalized it doesn't want to, you don't want to hear from them anymore. And it's just because someone can reach out to you, it doesn't mean you'd want to hear from them. So the main difference here in that situation is they're still living in the same NFL world.
They are, and Jerry is still talking. And listen, I feel bad for Brian Schottenheimer, although he knows this is the job he signed up for. And anyone else before him, Mike McCarthy or Jason Garrett, anyone who's ever been in that position knows that the owner is always going to talk. And that by the time, for example, you get to the podium on a Wednesday morning to start a new work week, your owner may have already said on the radio who is and who isn't going to play this week, or who is and who isn't going to practice this week, or if somebody's going to go on IR, or what he thinks the game plan should be against this week's opponent. This is what you sign up for. And there's no way around it. You're not going to prevent Jerry from speaking. But there comes a time, and he owns the team. I get it. No one's going to tell him, don't do it. But every time he does a radio show, every time he sits down with Maria Taylor and Jason Garrett on the Sunday Night Football pregame, he's going to get asked about Micah. And I don't want to say he can't help himself, because he has self-determination. Okay. He has the ability to stay in his lane. But he's going to keep getting asked. And every quote becomes news. And every quote pokes the bear. And every compliment, even if well-intended, by saying, hey, Dak is invaluable to the franchise.
Indispensable.
Well, of course, then Micah is not exactly. But Micah we could do without. Any compliment will seem like a backhanded compliment. Any compliment to anyone on the team seems like a slight to Micah. This is never going to stop, is my point, until the guy who is the quote machine stops talking about it.
But Andrew, where you and Jerry Jones differ, maybe not you, but the fan who is saying, why does Jerry do this, is that Jerry doesn't want this to stop. His goal is not to move on from this. His goal is to be talked about as much as possible, for us to talk about the Cowboys as much as possible. And it's working. So I'm not saying that he should handle his personal relationships this way. And if he asked me how he should handle his internal operations, I would not advise him to do things like this. And I would not advise people generally that it makes them happier to continue living in the past and to continue dwelling over where they feel like they were wronged. And I mean, it's the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur and Atonement this week. So this is very much on my mind. What I will say is that I think that Jerry Jones is not thinking about this as an interpersonal element. He is primarily thinking about this as an entertainment opportunity to draw eyeballs to the fans. And while I'm not saying Micah Parsons has to like it, Micah Parsons' $47 million a year contract does come in part because people like Jerry Jones create so much attention and value for the league.
Absolutely. And I went to the Netflix documentary premiere, The Thing in LA, where they showed episode 3 of the 49ers episode, and Jerry and Emmett and Michael were up there doing a round table with Al Michaels afterwards. And Jerry, he said it 5 times about, the old adage, any publicity is good publicity, although he didn't phrase it that way. He wants the soap opera. He wants the eyes. It's good for business. He's going to say that out loud and then continue to talk about this. I totally get it. There are times, though, when the press conferences seem more awkward and uncomfortable this year than they have in years past. And I would think that somebody would say, maybe you don't need the radio appearance. Maybe you don't need the weekly. Maybe we limit it to this and this and this. But no one is going to have that conversation with him. It's never, ever, ever going to happen. By the way, on the topic of Yom Kippur, can we do this real quick? When A.D. Mitchell dropped the ball heading into the end zone on Sunday in L.A., for those who don't know, A.D. Mitchell's real name, Adonai Mitchell. Adonai in Hebrew means God. And so my text chain with all my friends was a real knee slapper on Sunday about God and atonement coming up on Wednesday.
I actually was once interviewed for an article because there's a Jewish tradition to not say God's name except for in the form of prayer. And so I was actually asked once for an article, like, what do you do when you say the name? I'm like, well, he goes by AD. It's easier. But I did have that conversation with AD Mitchell one day being like, do you know that this is your name and that this is what it means to people who speak Hebrew? So
Did he know?
yeah, I think he was kind of like, he had some understanding, but I don't think he realized in terms of like the don't say the word element. So it was an interesting conversation.
Well, I mean, he did get up in front of the team allegedly on Monday, according to Shane Steichen, and apologize to the team. So he got his atonement and his forgiveness a couple of days early. And by the way, they're gonna have a shofar Thursday at TNF at SoFi Stadium, not the Galler horn like they have in Minnesota, but an actual shofar as
A
they break
Rams
the
horn
fast.
specifically for the Los
Yes.
Angeles Rams.
As they break the fast with the Rams and the 49ers. I mean, what better way to break the fast? And by the way, for years I've said I don't get the whole dairy meal. I know you can't cook, and I get it. But like no one has ever yeah, I want cream cheese for dinner. No one's ever said that. No one has ever said out loud, I want a heavy noodle kugel and cream cheese for dinner. Nobody.
We're getting real niche here.
Ever.
I love it. I love it.
No,
No, it is
that's
pretty
just
cool
me.
that the Rams are going to do this pregame blast, though, and commemorate or recognize that it is Yom Kippur. So I do appreciate that opportunity for education from them.
Exactly. And for 97.5% of our audience that has no idea what we're talking about, thank you for listening and watching. Coming up next, do the Bengals need a quarterback? I think the answer is yes, but what can they actually do? That's Jori. I'm Andrew. This is Inside Coverage. It's Inside Coverage here on Yahoo. My name is Andrew. Jori Epstein here as well. The other Monday night game was in Denver, where the Broncos just rolled all over the Bengals, and the offensive numbers are really, really, really bad. The Broncos had 512 yards of offense, which is eye-opening. But the Bengals only had 159, so the delta there was 353. The Broncos outgained the Jake Browning-led Bengals by 353 yards, which is the biggest difference between two teams in any game this year through 4 weeks, and more than 100 yards greater than the previous yardage difference, Jori, which was the Bills outgaining the Jets by 249 in week 2. Denver's 512 on offense was the most they've had in 11 years. The last time they did it was 2014 when Peyton was the quarterback, just to put that into perspective. The Bengals right now are reeling, and they obviously miss Joe Burrow, and there was a tense moment on the sideline that Zach Taylor downplayed afterwards between Jamar Chase, clearly frustrated, and his coach when the game was out of hand late. And you step back and you go, all right, if there's a chance Joe Burrow may come back, and by all accounts it would be late in December, it would likely be a playoff return, but they've got to get to the playoffs. Do they need to make a move? A couple of years ago, Jake Browning was fine down the stretch. He's fine. He held it down. Jake Browning right now doesn't look like he can hold it down. You have a team designed to drop back and throw the ball. You don't run the ball well, even though Chase Brown had a really nice year last year and is an ascending player. The offensive line is still very much a mess. I don't know who you can get. Can you get Jameis? Sure. Can you get Russell? Sure. Can you get Kirk Cousins? Yeah. I can make the argument you could go get Andy Dalton, like bring that reunion tour back to town. I think that would be cool. But I think you need to do something, and I think you need to do it soon.
I think what I would wonder, though, is there someone who is that much better for the Cincinnati Bengals right now that you think the cost is worth it and that you think the rest of the team is ready to support them to make a playoff push? I think if you're not actually getting to the playoffs with this person, then you shouldn't be making this move because you built your team around Joe Burrow and Joe Burrow working with Jamar Chase and working with T. Higgins. And that's what it is. Like, we know Trey Hendrickson is going to lead the defense. The defense... what was so interesting to me, Andrew, is when we were listening to the broadcast on Monday night. And again, I was talking about how the broadcast teams get this information from the coaches on the staff that you can often learn a lot. And Troy Aikman and Joe Buck were talking about how defensive coordinator Al Golden told them, if not admitted to them, that yes, when you are playing as a defense and you have Joe Burrow on your team, you have a different aim than what you need to do as a defense when Joe Burrow is not there. And so I think we have to recognize that the entire Cincinnati Bengals team planned for one outcome and one set of circumstances that is now wildly different. In the same way that the Baltimore Ravens, who we'll get to, have to do something different without Lamar. If you feel like your team required Joe Burrow for success, then you shouldn't trade for someone else and give up assets for it. What I'd ask you, Andrew, is what do we expect of one, head coaches, and two, general managers when you lose your starting quarterback who's one of the best players in the league? Like, do we expect them to stay afloat? Do we expect them to make the playoffs? Like, what's a realistic expectation?
I mean, I made the point last week. It's a great question. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm losing track of time. It's week 5, that the backup quarterback position is the one position you need to spend money on. You go out and spend $8 million for Marcus Mariota if you think he's the guy to help keep your team afloat for a couple of weeks. And that's all they really need from him, a couple of weeks until Jaden Daniels gets back. This is obviously more than that. It's not a couple of weeks. It's the overwhelming majority of the season. Burrow got hurt week 2. Was it week 2 or week 3? It's week 3, whatever it was. He got hurt in September, is my point. I don't know. If you look at the schedule, let's do that, Jori, because if you look at the schedule, this week, they are home against Detroit. I saw the Lions up close last week. The Browns defense played them very tough. The score not indicative of how close the game was through 2.5 quarters, but they're a juggernaut. We know that. That game is in it's in Cincinnati. They're not with Jake Browning or Kirk Cousins showing up tomorrow or Jameis showing up tomorrow. They're not going to beat the Lions, my opinion. Then they go to Green Bay. Then they get the Steelers at home on a short week on Thursday Night Football. These next 3 games are brutal. I don't think they're going to win them with any quarterback. I do think, however, for the sake of the locker room and for the frustration you saw last night, and that's part of it with the locker room, that they need to make some kind of move. I would try Kirk Cousins. I really would. Now, is that offensive line going to protect him? No, probably not. Can he get the ball out quicker? Maybe. Yeah, he probably can. Can he read a defense and get it out quicker? I think he can. Same system. He'll be fine. When I go get Jameis is like the fun cooker. He's the ultimate fun machine. I think it'd be a wild roller coaster. It'd be great to have him back in the AFC North. He's one of my favorite people. Sure, go do it. I don't know that Andy Dalton is going to be much of a difference maker. He could still play a little bit. There's a veteran that the Panthers have spent money on, and he came in last year and slung the ball around and actually played really well. For the sake of doing something, I think they have to do something. Now, how much do you pay? I don't know.
That was my
The Falcons
question.
aren't
What are you
gonna give-
willing to spend?
Yeah.
What are you willing to give up for
Well,
Kirk
okay.
Cousins? I mean, I would say maybe like a Russell Wilson type thing if the Giants have already paid his salary. I actually think the Giants should be more concerned about keeping Jameis than Russ in some ways because Jameis has been such a mentor to Jackson Dart. But we know how expensive Kirk Cousins is. Like, are you actually willing to pay what it takes to get him for the level of play you're going to get?
Well, what would you give up? Would you give up 4? How about that?
I don't know.
Would
I
you give
think
up
if
a
you
4?
I think if you would, then you should feel like you should at least in the final weeks of the season be contending for the playoffs. I wouldn't say it's a fail if you don't make it to the playoffs because maybe you're just trying to develop your team for next year. But I think you would need to be winning, 9 games this season at least. Do you think Kirk Cousins is going to lead them to a 9-win season?
I don't know. It's a tough schedule. It's a tough
If
answer.
not, why we're
They
paying
have
for it?
all 7. They have all 7 of their picks. Here's where I think they risk. If they don't make a move, I think the frustration you saw last night from Jamar, I think only gets worse. And I think it permeates the locker room. I'm not in that locker room. I'm not pretending to know if they're on the edge of blowing up. I'm not suggesting they are. But if you have more and more games like we saw yesterday, it is inevitable. It is going to happen. And if you don't make a move, are you signaling to the locker room and to the team and to the city, yep, you know what? We're good as we are. We're going to ride this out. And if the season's a disaster, so be it. And you waste a year of Jamar's prime. You waste a year of T. Higgins' prime. You have, in essence, said goodbye to Trey Hendrickson because no one thinks he's coming back next year. And you wrote all those massive checks. I don't want to say for nothing because you hope to have the 2 wide receivers long term, but you wrote those checks for who, for what, to quote Ricky Waters. We'll go home now.
But I'm wondering if you're going to be in that situation even with one of these guys. I mean, if you look at ESPN's Seth Walder, who's definitely really rooted in analytics, he's not just going out there making opinions. He wrote an article in September, so just a couple weeks ago, ranking the backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And where do you think Jake Browning ranked on the backup quarterbacks in the NFL?
We're going 1 through 32. Obviously, we're not like counting 2 giants in there.
It's not 1 through 32. There's 12 on this list. Do you think he made the list?
Okay.
And if so, where?
Do I think he made the? I think he made the list on the. I think he was like 10 to 12, somewhere in there.
He's 2. He's number 2 on this
Really?
list by Seth Walton. Yes. So, that's what I'm saying is that people thought Jake Browning was the guy that you want to go trade for. Only Kirk was higher. And I'm not positive that Kirk coming in without the rapport that Jake Browning has. I think you need to give this a couple more weeks. You can say there's frustration, and there should be frustration. I also recognize that it's hard because, you're talking about, the Vikings and the Denver Broncos defenses are not the defenses you want your backup quarterback to have to go in and start. I get that Jake Browning beat the Vikings a couple years ago. We digress. Neither are the games that they have coming up. But I don't know that Kirk Cousins is going to be that much better. And okay, you mentioned giving up a third, giving up a fourth. I think you said a fourth. Well, it's not just a fourth. It's also what salary are you paying for him? Are you wanting to spend all this cap space on Kirk Cousins when you just maxed out on Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase? And you paid a lot of money to T. Higgins, even if you can get out after a couple of years. No, by the way, Trey Hendrickson. Who are they? Where's this money coming from?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the Bengals have written a lot of checks. The idea that they're going to write another check, because the Falcons are going to want someone to pay a lot of the freight here, or chip in a higher pick. You want to just flip a 6 to the Falcons, then you're paying a lot of that money. A lot of that money. I hear you. I think they're in a bad spot. They need Jake Browning to play better. But this idea that he's going to throw up 300 yards a week and then we can get back to the Jake Browning from 3 years ago, I think is a bit delusional. And the schedule is brutal. But listen, the AFC North, other than the Steelers, it's kind of ugly right now. Let's talk about the Ravens because they fell to 1-3. We talked about them a little bit yesterday and how I joked that they were becoming the Bengals of last year. They're going to score 30 points a game and lose because the defense is going to give up more. Well, now they have Lamar Jackson injured, and there's a report out of Baltimore. He could be out multiple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. This week, they get the Houston Texans, so it's Cooper Rush that's up. John Harbaugh yesterday, these comments have kind of flown under the radar, but the Ravens team site has written them up, BaltimoreRavens.com. I'm going to read from this article right now. Sarah Ellison, who covers the Ravens, had a long list of these quotes yesterday. She suggested that Harbaugh was hammering his offensive coordinator and his offensive staff. I don't know that he was hammering them, but instead of hammering Zach Orr, the defensive coordinator in his second year, he kind of defended Zach Orr and then turned the focus to the offense. And here, so the second possession, I'm reading from the team article. Their second possession ended when Lamar Jackson was intercepted by Chief linebacker Leo Chenal, who made a leaping grab in front of Mark Andrews. Jackson was heavily pressured before making the throw by an inside blitz the Ravens didn't pick up. And here's the quote now from Harbaugh. "It wasn't a good play call. It wasn't a play where we put our guys in the right position in that situation. I'm not happy with it at all. None of us are. We had downfield routes with no checkdowns. That kills your drive. I don't like that play call at all or the result of it." And I continue reading. On its next possession, Baltimore committed a pair of delay of game penalties in a 3-play span. Harbaugh, that was a bad series. We've got to look at it honestly as a coaching staff. That was not good. Later in the half, the Ravens went for it on 4th and 1. The Chiefs blitz the house. Spags went I think 13% cover 0 in that game, which is just maniacal. And Lamar had to throw the ball out of bounds. Harbaugh, you go for it and you don't have a good plan. You just don't. We didn't do a good job. That was a bad call. We didn't put our players in the position we needed to put them in to execute and convert on 3rd and short or 4th and short. And then he said they didn't run the ball. Quote, "We didn't stick to the plan that we had." Now, sometimes in coaching, you deflect from criticizing the obvious target and you criticize someone else, right, to deflect. Don't look over here. I'm going to go after that guy. Todd Monken is amazingly respected around the NFL as a play caller. Right? He's gotten universal praise the last couple of years for what he has done offensively. Now, some people don't like his playoff play calling, but what he has done with Lamar Jackson, who is now as deadly a pocket passer as there is in the league. But these quotes, they're different, Jori.
Yeah, I definitely would not like them if I were Todd Monken. I think the fact that this isn't a head coach with play calling responsibilities changes it, because if this is Brian Schottenheimer saying this, for example, who's both head coach and offensive play caller for the Cowboys, then he could be doing it because he is trying to deflect criticism from the players and put it onto the coaches and say, hey, I'm taking this responsibility. I should have done a better play call. It's harder to justify that when you have John Harbaugh there, who is not calling the plays. And so that's where I think it gets tricky. But I will say, to me, this mostly underscores how special, unique, and irreplaceable Lamar Jackson is. And I know that almost sounds trite because we all know he's won MVPs, etc. But it's not just that he's super talented. It's that Cooper Rush is not going to be able to do what Lamar Jackson's doing. And that's fine. I still think actually Cooper Rush is one of the better backups in the league, and maybe top 5, top 10 backup in the league. I watched how many games he won for the Cowboys over the years. But I think you have to realize you need to call a game differently for Cooper Rush than Lamar Jackson, and you need to be ready to do that. And so for me, if you say, okay, Lamar's not playing again this week, I want to see a different play call and a different, not just different play call, I should say, a different game plan for the entire week for an offense led by Cooper Rush. Because even if you're talking about Derrick Henry, well, without the threat of Lamar's legs, that's going to look different too.
Yeah, I'm curious what the offense looks like with Cooper Rush. I mean, Zay Flowers on any other team that didn't have Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson would be a top of the marquee kind of guy. They can't run the same offense. Clearly, there's no quarterback run game. They have to become a drop back team, a move the pocket team. They're facing a Houston team that, sees the sunshine this week because they finally won a game. But if Lamar's out multiple weeks, this is a test for Todd Monken. And curious, do you think, and again, we weren't there, but this strikes me almost as what like Belichick used to do. Like, I'm going to rip Tom Brady in front of the team because I know he can take it. Right? Even though I know there are other issues here, but I need to prove to other people that I'm going to take out this guy too.
Did we discuss the other day how Tom Brady said on a broadcast last week when they asked him, oh, you just knew that you were getting ripped because then everyone could, right? And Brady's like, no, I wanted to kill the guy because it drove me crazy. Like, do you know how many Super Bowls I won? So people don't, even if that is the intent, people do not always like it. So I would say that
no, it doesn't feel good.
It's possible John Harbaugh and Todd Monken disagreed on a couple play calls, and he was trying to be like, hey, this is what I think we should do. It's possible that the players were frustrated and he was trying to side with the players over the coaches. I don't know. I also don't think it's that crazy. Like, most of this stuff becomes crazier when you say it in a public forum than that you said it at all. Because if he said in a meeting to Todd Monken, hey, this play call didn't work, that wasn't a good choice for that situation, that's what he should be doing. That's John Harbaugh's job to say that. The problem is, when do you start doing that publicly, and then why are you doing it publicly?
Yeah, exactly. Because there are plenty of coaches that want to criticize the play caller, but they do it behind the scenes. Or maybe they say, hey, you know what? Collectively, we need to look at what we're doing and maybe put our players in a better position. Right? That's the diplomatic way you say it, as opposed to saying, yeah, I didn't like the play call. We didn't have a plan. Bad. But hey, it's kind of the way things are going right now with the Ravens. They lose Lamar Jackson and half their defense is injured. All right, allow me a minute here, Jori, and I appreciate you in advance. Well, I appreciate you, period. I'm gonna change my hat here. This is actually a wardrobe change here. I just so happen to have a Syracuse hat. This is see my silly beach walk and talks, the hat I'm always wearing there. I was sitting at a baseball game today, Tigers over the Guardians 2-1, and I looked at my phone. And I see just stunning news, because the guy's not that much older than me, that we have lost a basketball legend in Lawrence Moten, the Syracuse legend, the former second-round pick of the Memphis Grizzlies. We lost him at 53 today, and we don't know why yet. But I just wanted to say a couple of words here about a guy who, I'm from Northern Virginia. He went to Archbishop Carroll in D.C., but from my area, and then we overlapped a little bit at Syracuse. I was a freshman. He was a senior. But about one of the best basketball players, and this is a football angle as well, two-way prep players in the history of the Washington, D.C. area. So All Met is what the Washington Post hands out, awards for the best high school players, boys and girls, and all kinds of sports. Lawrence Moten was All Met for 2 years in both basketball and football. That is a very, very, very rare thing. It's D.C., it's Maryland, it's Virginia, it's the entire region. And he was a basketball great and a football great. Lawrence Moten, as a football player, was the Washington Post Defensive Player of the Year He picked off 13 passes playing safety. He had a 101-yard pick six. He was also the Touchdown Club Defensive Player of the Year. And he caught 55 passes for 10 touchdowns. Went to Syracuse, followed his high school quarterback Marvin Graves up there. Graves is a little bit older. And then he went on to be one of the greatest players in the history of the Big East. So I always judge players on where they were statistically when they were retired. For example, Ozzie Newsome, the Ravens GM, Hall of Fame as a Browns tight end. The day he retired, he had the most receptions ever for a tight end, 662. Since then, it's been passed by 100 guys, but when he retired, he was the guy. When Lawrence Moten retired, he had the most points scored in Big East competition in the history of that great conference. So we're talking Patrick Ewing and Ray Allen and Allen Iverson and Chris Mullen and all those greats from the real Big East, not like this new watered down crazy like how many ever states Big East, like the real Big East, the Thompson, Boeheim, Lou Carnesecca, that Big East. Lawrence Moten scored the most points. He is still and by the way, he held that for 25 years before it was eventually passed a couple of times. And he is still to this day the leading scorer in the history of Syracuse basketball. They called him Lomo, Poetry and Moten. We lost him way too young. He was 53 years old, and he truly was a legend. Jori, I know you didn't know Lawrence Moten. I know you probably have nothing to say about that, but I thank you for allowing me to put on my Syracuse hat, because he was, honestly, the dude is amazing. Like, to do that in high school and to be, like, in any city, but especially one with such a proud prep tradition like DC, that
Right.
good into sports is ridiculous.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it means a lot to his family, his friends, his teammates, and coaches that you took that moment. So may his memory be a blessing. And I hope that his legacy continues to inspire people in the sport, people in the industry, and all those who knew and loved him.
Absolutely. Well said. Thanks for letting me do that. And that's it for our show today. This show is back tomorrow without me and Jori, but with a fantastic cast. And we thank you for not only listening and watching this edition of Inside Coverage, but tomorrow and Thursday, Wednesday and Thursday as well. I am off to London with the Browns. Maybe I'll phone in Thursday from over there. And remember, I refuse to say across the pond. Right? That is a sportscaster cliche. If I say across the pond during the game broadcast on Sunday, please text me, tweet me, hit me up on social, because I deserve to be fined. For Jori, I'm Andrew. So long, everybody.